Thank you for tuning into our podcast hosted by Moving Water Alliance. I am Bronagh, the Executive Editor with The Planet Calls. Stay tuned and do not forget to share and subscribe to our podcast. Today we will talk about zero waste and how it relates with beaches and river cleanups. Richard Curtin is the Coastal Programmes Officer for Dublin with Clean Coasts. His work involves engaging with communities and helping them to make a positive impact on their local environment. He comes from a diverse academic background and has been involved with various environmental and climate campaigns in Ireland over the last decade. Welcome to our show, Richard. We are thrilled that you could join us today.
Hi, Bronagh. Thanks for having me on. I'm delighted to speak to you.
Thank you, Richard. So people are increasingly adopting zero waste lifestyles, which essentially involves us sending nothing to landfill and reusing as much as we possibly can. As a society, we produce so much waste, particularly plastic-based waste, which takes a very long time to break down. In particular, plastic bags and styrofoam cups take over 500 years to break down and technically never actually biodegrade. This means all the plastic we're using in our individual lifetimes is still on the planet after we are long gone, continuing to pollute our Earth. According to research, we are producing 300 million tonnes of plastic worldwide each year. In Ireland particularly, we send 63,000 tonnes of textiles to landfill each year, most of which are fast fashion items, which, as we know it, are plastic-based materials once again. Given the impact that plastic and waste have on our planet, it is clear we need to adopt zero-waste lifestyles and principles. So, Richard, since recycling is not really an answer to our plastic problem, why is zero waste a better solution? And what exactly is it?
Yeah, so it's interesting when you come to kind of zero waste and kind of compare it to recycling. So if we look at kind of like you mentioned, there's some of the strong facts about the impacts of plastics. Only about 9% of the plastic that has ever been created has been recycled. The other 12% has been incinerated, and the rest actually ended up either landfill or on our natural environment. But where actual zero waste comes in is, and where it differs to recycling, it's more of a philosophy. So it's kind of like zero waste. There's a really good definition that I found on the internet about it, and it says zero waste is the philosophy that encourages the redesign of life cycles so that rubbish is not sent to landfill. So we're all kind of familiar with the reduce, reuse, recycle. But what zero waste kind of pyramid at the very top, what it tries to do is kind of like rethink, refuse, redesign. So we're trying to kind of like eliminate waste wherever possible, rethink how we use waste or use products, and also kind of redesign so waste is eliminated. And then underneath that is reduce. So it's very much kind of reduce our kind of consumption of products, reduce consumption of kind of waste or any kind of items that we don't particularly need to use. And then below that then is where we come into reuse or repair. So it's basically try to kind of encourages repurposing. And then below that is kind of like recycle. So you can see there that like it's near in the bottom half of the zero waste kind of pyramid that recycle comes in. And that's all, we're all kind of quite familiar with what recycle is. And then the last two in the zero waste pyramid is kind of rot. And then at the very bottom, anything that doesn't fall into the above criteria comes into unacceptable. So you can see that like zero waste has like how it differs from, straight away you can identify how it differs from recycling, and there's a lot more. It tries to kind of solve the issue more of a kind of an upstream. And there's many kind of teams throughout the kind of zero waste. So it kind of looks at the kind of like the entire life cycle of products. So instead of where traditional kind of cradle to grave when it comes to a product, so it's you kind of use it, it's made, it's used, and then it's disposed. But what cradle to cradle is trying to kind of like, at the design stage, you look at the entire life cycle of the project, of the product, and you kind of try to, you try to eliminate waste, and you try to repurpose it whenever possible. There's also like other elements kind of peppered throughout kind of zero waste. It would be anti-consumerism. So try to like cut down consumerism. It would try to encourage kind of our traditional skills, you know, kind of like making your own stuff, living simply, that whole kind of minimalistic lifestyle. And other elements would be is trying to kind of like eliminate like single-use plastics and try to kind of like educate people about the impacts of plastics. And also one thing that's very important within zero waste kind of zero waste philosophy is the right to repair and try to eliminate planned obsolescence. So like try to encourage kind of good design in products that we use, like have kind of fair access. So people, when they buy a product, are able to repair it, but also like have consumers informed of what products can be repaired and what products can't be. So you can see that like there is a kind of a lot to zero waste, and it kind of encompasses like all aspects of our life. And it kind of like, that's how it kind of reaches out. And it is like, as you were saying at the start, some of the kind of starting figures you were saying, but I was reading recently that it's estimated that up to half our greenhouse gas emissions and up to 90% of our biodiversity loss actually comes from the resources that we extract. So that's all encompassed into the products we use, the waste we use. And the more zero waste our society can do, the less emissions we're going to create. And linking back into recycling, like recycling, what it does, it doesn't solve the underlying problem. It kind of looks more to deal with the actual symptoms. And that's where the kind of zero waste is more and more, it's more important and more valuable approach that we need to take in future for a more environmental society.
Yeah, it's really interesting to kind of look at it as a pyramid, as you were saying, and kind of a philosophy. How do you think we can get people to adopt this lifestyle?
Yeah, I think we need to kind of come at it from as many different angles as possible. So, like, we need to come to like downstream solutions, like things what clean coats do. So we have a number of different campaigns, kind of like to educate people around how to lead zero waste lifestyle. So stuff what we do is we try to lead by example, so like showcase how people can live zero waste lifestyle. We see this a lot on kind of social media or like influencers and stuff like that, like how to kind of adopt zero waste policies. Try to kind of, I think also as part of education is kind of explain the benefits, like the environmental impacts of living a zero waste lifestyle, like the positive aspects that have on the environment, but also even simple things like starting a discussion, like, the way, like with your friends and family, like how can people just open up those conversations about the impacts of waste and how people can even make small steps and stuff like that. And like providing those facts that you just said earlier, like it can kind of, move people in that right direction. But this also needs to be coupled with upstream solutions. So we need to how can we eliminate waste in the process? So the way a lot of these decisions are made for us before we even walk into the shop, supermarket, and that, like, is our apple wrapped in a plastic bag and stuff like that. So that's why it needs to be, coupled with environmental solutions, upstream solutions. And it kind of links back into, I don't know, you're familiar with Michael Mann, the climatologist, and he was kind of saying that, we need to make the environmental choices the cheaper choices. So that's what we need to do when it comes to kind of zero waste, is like when it comes to, citizens, that the zero waste lifestyle is the cheaper lifestyle going into the future. And so there's numerous different ways how people we can move people along, but it has to come at all angles.
Yeah, and speaking on adopting a zero waste lifestyle as well, I would encourage all of our listeners to navigate to the podcast notes of this section, where you'll find a link to our very first issue of the Planet Calls magazine. It has a whole section on zero waste, so you can definitely get a lot of learnings from there. We've spoken now about ourselves and what we can do as individuals and our own responsibility, but what can governments do to curb plastic pollution?
Yeah, there has been kind of a number of different changes over the last couple of years, where kind of like the zero waste philosophy and, has been kind of peppered into kind of policy and that and legislation. So from an EU perspective, we've got the Single-Use Plastics Directive, and what that has done is it's kind of introduced a number of different measures to kind of tackle certain single-use plastics. So things like plastic cutlery, plates, straws, cotton buds, beverage stories, and a number of other different items have been kind of banned, and you can only use certain kind of compostable items going forward. They also, there's other elements within the Single-Use Plastic Directive is encouraging, a large-scale recycling. So it wants to kind of have a 90% recycling target for all kind of plastic bottles, and also encourage the use of recycling items within the creation of plastic bottles as well. And there's other elements as well. Like there's the extended user responsibility, which is going to basically introduce kind of polluter pays principle within kind of certain items that go out onto market. So basically, companies will be more responsible, will be held responsible to kind of in the cleanup of kind of littered items and that. So that's kind of that. And then we also have the kind of circular economy action plan, and that has a kind of it has this element within it called the sustainable products policy framework, and like that's basically trying to remove things that are like short-lived items, unrepairables, unrecycled items from the kind of market going forward. And it's going to other things that are peppered throughout it is kind of like, regulatory measures to kind of like things like, chargers for mobile phones and similar devices. So basically eliminate, the way if you have an iPhone and you have a, Samsung, that they all have this similar kind of charger. So it eliminate that kind of extra waste and that. And then there's like other elements as well in relation to kind of like they wanted to design kind of reusable and recyclable packaging, reducing the complexity of packaging of materials. So there's like lots of different kind of elements. When you come from, and then like when you kind of come from a national level and an Irish level, what we've had this zero waste action plan that was introduced last year. And one of the big things to kind of introduce is the kind of like deposit returns scheme. So that's going to highlight the basically when you buy a can of Coke, it's going to put a tax on it, and that basically will encourage the return of that can of Coke. You get 20 cents back, and like that's going to encourage a lot more recycling. But other elements as well to kind of they're going to try to possibly introduce a virgin plastic levy. So that would actually massively kind of incentivize more companies to use, instead of using kind of virgin plastic, they would use recycled plastic, which would kind of encourage more recycling and make it more profitable to kind of recycling. And there's lots of other elements that there's potential kind of bans on disposable cups, kind of like a latte levy they're going to introduce, actions on. So there's lots of kind of different kind of options that are coming down the line. And what they're kind of do is there's one or two things that is kind of quite interesting as well. Is when we try to kind of like, as we try to eliminate waste, we have to be kind of quite cognizant as well as not to increase food waste, because sometimes, you might, like things like vacuum packed meat, it can last up to like, 25 to 30 days longer when it's vacuum packed compared to meat that's not. So, when we might try like eliminate a kind of a plastic or waste issue, we might create a food waste issue. So like, any of these policies that I have to take into kind of a holistic approach that we're not kind of like causing kind of other issues down the line, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear some of the developments there and everything. With sustainability, like in adopting a zero waste lifestyle, a lot of it comes down to accessibility. So do you think that people living in urban areas can also easily adopt zero waste lifestyle, or how can they get started on that?
Yeah, it's interesting because like people living in urban areas probably have a head start for people based in rurals, because like there's a lot more access to kind of zero waste shops and stuff like that. But the way what I always try to do is, when you're starting zero waste lifestyle is to, start small, like firstly, don't feel guilty. Like, sometimes like, even shopping in, these zero waste shops, it can be more expensive. So just do what you can afford. And basically, like, also what I would advise is like, small, kind of like start with the small hanging fruits, things like reusable water bottles, kind of like coffee cup straws, cutlery, start kind of introducing them into your lifestyle. Look at your purchasing decisions, when you're kind of, can you kind of bulk buy items, or can you kind of like, shop, as you said, if you can afford to shop more in zero waste place, can you introduce things like, clean film wraps, swap them. Can you like swap clean film wraps for things like, washable beeswax wraps, like usable cottons, sandwich bags instead of plastic bags. There's loads of different things. And even like in cosmetics, like, I've started to make my own toothpaste in the last while, and, you can make your own cleaning products. There's loads of information online, on different ways you can get involved. And you can also kind of like, even in your local area, especially in urban areas, you can find like local support groups, can you get involved with one of the kind of zero waste support groups? But there's the one thing I would try and message I would give to people trying to go on that journey is try not to be like, don't feel guilty about the process. You know, you might try not to get overwhelmed. You can very much, you know, I myself would be a very much an imperfect environmentalist. I do what I can, and then sometimes, like, you know, I might be driving along and forgot my reusable coffee cup, but I wouldn't beat myself up by it, if that makes sense. You know, like sometimes you kind of make mistakes and stuff like that, but try not to try and do as much as possible. And the other kind of probably other things I would recommend is you know, there's like reusable sanitary products for women, like moon cups and that, and you know, there's zero waste zero waste razors and that. So there's loads of different ways people can get involved.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say it's like good of you saying, you know, that not to kind of get mad at yourself and stuff like that if you do slip up, because like this is obviously a really difficult lifestyle to stick to because there's just so much waste everywhere, and it is difficult. You obviously have to do a big lifestyle audit if you were to try and be 100% zero waste, you know. And I think if you know the Useless Project, I think they say it best in terms of sustainability. Like, they want people being imperfectly sustainable, not everyone being, you know, 100%. Like, it's so much better having more people doing it imperfectly. But what are some of the zero waste things we can adopt immediately in our homes today, do you think?
Yeah, there's loads of different things. One thing that I found was really interesting to do was actually do a bin audit. So you're seeing what actually items that are turning up in your bin, and you're seeing, like, trying to kind of like jot down how you can actually eliminate them, and is there other ways, is there other alternatives you can use. So that's one of the first things I would recommend doing. Online, there's loads of different kind of websites. There's like mywaste.ie, which has loads of information. There's also, I would kind of try to, like, is there a way you can tackle food waste and that? Like, Stop Food Waste is another fantastic resource. You know, even looking around your kind of what items you use, like, you know, if you're concerned about, you know, what items, if they're repairable or not, there's another kind of fantastic resource called Repair My Stuff, you know. And what another kind of brilliant kind of resource is the Zero Waste Facebook, the Irish one. That, like, loads, if you have any questions or anything like that, people are always kind of putting up questions of, oh, can this be recycled, or how do you get rid of this? How do you kind of properly upcycle this particular items as well? And even if you're not in not in an urban area, you can kind of look into possibly setting up a compost at home. You know, Antashka is a fantastic guide and how encouraging people how to set up compost, and that, like, that will help people move away to moving away from the use of unsustainable peat. And also, like, try to kind of link in with the different kind of events. So, you know, like for Secondhand September, like, if you do have to kind of purchase an item, you know, can you purchase secondhand? You know, give items new lease to life. As I was saying, like, we have 2 campaigns, Break Up with Plastic, which comes around for Valentine's Day. There's loads of kind of different tips there on how you, within that campaign, of how you can reduce your plastic footprint. And then also we have Plastic Free July. There's always these kind of events kind of happening that you can kind of, like, you know, slowly interlink or kind of insert kind of ways of that zero waste lifestyle. But as you said, like, earlier on, it's better for us all to be in perfect zero waste than try to be like beat yourself up over being the perfect beings.
Yeah, no, definitely. Thanks so much though, Richard. That's really motivating to hear. And like, you've given so many insights and everything. Like, you've even inspired me to go off and live a even more so zero waste life. So, while also not kicking myself up about it.
Yeah. And it is good. It's interesting that zero waste is going to play a critical part in the kind of, like, you know, the journey to a low carbon society. Like, you know, like, the more we kind of eliminate plastics, like, from upstream, like, the less emissions we have. Because obviously, another interesting fact is by the estimated by 2050, up to 12 to 15% of our emissions are going to come from the creation of plastics. So the sooner we kind of get this designed out of our lifestyles and out of our everyday lives, it's going to have, like, so many other positive impacts.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thanks so much.
Yeah, perfect.
Thanks for coming on anyway. It was really great to chat with you. And Yeah, give us the DIY toothpaste recipe anyway.
Yeah. So that was with kind of baking soda, and it was with coconut oil and some peppermint. That was my recipe for that. Now it's interesting. It takes a while to get used to.
For sure. I'd say you had to give that a few goes, Googling different ingredients and everything.
Yeah, no, very much so. But you kind of get, like, one thing I find about, especially with zero waste compared to other environmental kind of topics, are that there's so much information out there, and there's so many tips, and there's so many different ways you can go on the journey. So I think, like, I would advise anyone just to kind of explore online, see what kind of tips you can get, and follow some really interesting people, or even follow some of our kind of campaigns, and you'll pick up loads of information and just enjoy the journey.
Yeah, no, definitely. We'll have all your links in the notes anyway. And thanks again for coming on. It was really, really great.
Perfect. Okay, thanks, Bronagh.
If you like hearing about environmental issues and beach and river cleanups around the world, please do subscribe and share the Moving Water Alliance podcast. Thank you all for listening. We will be back with you soon.